Welcome everybody. My name is Rikard Engberg and I'm an equity research analyst at Carnegie Investment Bank. With me I have Ace St Germain, CEO of Beyond Frames. Welcome Ace.
Thank you, thanks for having us. Well great, I guess I'll get started. Hello, hi, as mentioned I'm Ace St Germain, the CEO for Beyond Frames Entertainment. And at Beyond Frames we believe everyone should have the opportunity to live out their greatest fantasies. So whether or not you have desires to travel through space or fight dragons or maybe be in a fast NASCAR race, maybe you have more humble ambitions, maybe you want to learn how to cook with your favorite chef, write in your own room, or play your favorite instrument with your favorite artist, or you just want to get out of this long, cold Swedish winter for a little bit. You can do that today, right? We have virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, spatial computing. We are closer to science fiction than I think we've ever been in the history of man. And that's translating well, right? So we have about 55 billion USD coming to the market in 2024 estimated, and about 24 million VR headsets in aggregate in the market. And some numbers put this up at 50. It depends who you want to believe. But the growth has been substantial over time. Even discounting COVID, it's been substantial as it's climbed over the years. And there's a reason for that. Some of the biggest tech companies in the world have backed basically what is they're trying to be the key port to endless possibilities. But there's a major issue in the space when it comes to how the VR, XR ecosystem works. Players are in need of games to play because there's kind of a shortage. Studios in general are in need of funding to be able to provide those games. Distributors are desperate for content. And generally speaking, the industry is a little too niche for the blue chip incumbent players who are playing in the multi-billions of dollars per single franchise to be able to come to this market and spend their time here. So there's a really long runway and not a lot of people willing to fill the space. And that's a little bit where we come in. So that's who we are. We're Beyond Frames, and our goal is to fulfill fantasies through immersive entertainment. That is our focus and reason for being in this world. And if you're not familiar with the games ecosystem, I can give you just the shortest of primers. We are a publisher who also owns some developers who develop games. We bring those games to platforms, which are then sold to end consumers. In turn, those consumers pay for our games, and then we have a revenue share generally with the developer. We pay a fee to the store. And that's generally how the money flows to the ecosystem. So if you're not familiar with this, just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of that if you're unfamiliar where the money kind of goes in and out in our industry. And as mentioned, we are a set of studios and a publisher. And so for the snapshot there, the studios make games. So they are owned and operated studios within our portfolio that create games and intellectual property that we then own. And on the publishing side, we not only sell and distribute our own games, but also third-party games for external studios as well. And in return for giving them funding, marketing, distribution, rights management, and general partnerships, they provide us a revenue share off all of their games. When we talk about a portfolio, this is effectively how we think about our strategy and how we break it out. We believe really strongly in a diverse portfolio with extremely spread out risk. So if you look at the pyramid in the middle as being a representation of how much content we take on volume from the top to bottom. On the very top, we have our highest risk individually produced titles that we effectively try to get subsidized through partnerships with headset partners and other publishers. But those effectively give us the highest amount of potential reward and the highest amount of revenue for that initiative. And then you move down to the bottom, we spend very little on titles that we do externally. So we go to another studio and provide them some funding and some support. We don't actually pay that much for it. We don't get as much on margin out of it, but the amount of shots on goal we could take there give us a lot of learnings, and the general opportunity for us to make money there is pretty strong, which you'll see here in a second. So our strategy has actually net some pretty strong performance out of us over the last year. So I joined the company in 2022. Then we started to set a new strategy when I arrived. It took about 8 months to 9 months for us to start cooking that strategy up so that we can actually put it in the market. And once we did, the 2023 results were pretty substantial. Again, we were 452% year over year for the full year. Our Q4 results were, well, that was 870%, I think, year over year. We went from negative EBITDA to positive EBITDA in a single year. And we acquired a bunch of project funding from external partners to help us build our games. So we made significant movement between the years in moving our strategy over to this more like diverse portfolio that's heavily subsidized. So zooming in a little bit more about who we are today. So when we talked about studios, we have majority ownership in 2 studios, which is Cortopia and Moon Mode, and in Odd Raven we have a minority stake at about 38%. They're all award-winning studios making incredible content. Right now we have 5 games in market with an additional 4 coming to market in the near future. And if I could talk a little bit about some of those games, I think this is where I get really excited about what we're doing next. So, you know, we talk about strategy and like, how do you pick a winner? How do you pick a hit? It's a little bit an impossible task, but there are some pretty best practice bankable things you could do to try to ensure that your hit rate is a little bit higher than average. So we take a look at the 3 titles that we're currently working on inside of Cortopia Studios. One of them is a sequel to one of the highest selling VR games of all time. And we received project funding of 28 million SEK to fully fund the development of that particular project from an external publisher. Our second game is a VR title based on a extremely lucrative top grossing US-based media franchise, in which we recently just announced we received 25.8 million SEK, co-funded by an external party. And then finally, we have our own original intellectual property VR title, which was also co-funded for an additional 4.6 million from an external party. So this is a really core component for us. Like, why take on all the risk when we don't have to? And something I probably don't talk well enough about is the fact that these deals come with really lucrative upside for us. So while the partners are actually taking on a significant chunk, if not a majority of, or not all, of the risk for these projects, we're actually taking a majority of the upside in the end. So it's a pretty strong deal for us. And last but not least amongst our studios is Odd Raven, who is currently working on a new non-VR title, which we can't say too much about, but that's also majority co-funded by an external party. So if I were to move on to the publishing business, so the publishing business is where we go out for the third-party studios, again, studios that don't belong to us, and we go and we fund them, provide various services, bring their games to market, then take a revenue share. And in 2023, as mentioned, we really ramped up what we were doing strategically and in our planning. We went from launching 1 game in 2022 to 5 games in 2024, so it was quite the jump in terms of operations, but we made it work. One of those games in particular, I want to highlight Ghosts of Tabor, which was the 4th game we launched within the year. That has gone on to have tremendous success within the VR space. We announced publicly that it made over $10 million US while still being in early access. If you're not familiar with what that means, in early access means it's not on public stores, meaning searching for it is nearly impossible. It gets no time in terms of promotion on store itself. It was a lot of word of mouth, heavy social activity and marketing on our side to be able to drive visibility of that title. It currently has it had 500,000 unique players and officially launched to the main store now on February 8th, which those numbers will be best reported in Q1. One other thing I'm happy to announce is that we have officially moved the game into a games as a service model. If you're not familiar with that, similar to the software as a service model, we launch additional content for the game, which players then go and purchase. We had several pieces of DLC launch already prior to launch while it was still in early access, which we were extremely happy with performance. And we actually just launched one a couple weeks ago, and I'll share a trailer with that. So each one of these updates is pretty substantial. What we're getting people to pay for: new bosses, new maps, new coffee, I guess. I forgot that was on the back half of the trailer. So players have been really excited about picking up these new packages and buying, and we're really happy. And on average, what we're seeing is that the attach rates of people who are actually purchasing the games, the DLC attached to the main games, are in line with some of the most successful games as a service titles that we've seen in non-VR games. So we're really happy with that trend, and we continue to see that and hope to see that this game continues to deliver for us for the coming years. The other aspect of this is that because of the success of the game, and really leading into the launch of the game, Combat Waffle was able to build a substantial audience. So we have 90,000 plus Discord members. To help you put that into focus, because sometimes 90,000 doesn't seem like too much, it's a dedicated set of 90,000 players that actually puts their Discord channel as the largest first-person shooter-focused Discord channel in the world. So that puts us above even other traditional games market series locations. And they are extremely loud. It is a very comfortable audience in terms of going out to promote games that they're making. In addition to that, they rocketed up to 180,000 TikTok followers overnight, again, as following for what they're currently doing, which is a really strong marketing channel for games. And so, again, for us, similar to our own productions, where we look for bankable things like known IP and built-in audience, we know that Combat Waffle has an extremely passionate built-in audience who are already building more Discord channels for their new games. So we went ahead and decided to get into a publishing agreement for them for their next two games, which are Grim and Silent North. Similar survival style first-person shooter games that meet that market need and standard. So pretty excited about that. So I just spent probably in the last 10 minutes talking, or maybe 15 minutes here talking specifically about VR and XR and our success in that space. And so we do plan on like planting our feet and making sure that we continue to scale in that space, since we are seeing success and have all the metrics and talent to be able to grow where we are. But our next big phase of the company is to move a little bit further. So, our goal when we talk about being, fantasy fulfillment with immersive entertainment, we believe that if we want to be one of the greatest providers of immersive entertainment in the world, that we're going to need to expand a little bit. So our goal is to now move into PC and console games as an addition to what we're currently doing in XR to help complement our portfolio, because we believe that if we're not in the pockets and hands of every single one of our fans, we're not really doing our job in terms of our current vision. So we don't have much to say about that today, but happy to talk about that in the future. So thank you. That's us.
Thank you so much, Ace. And let me start with a few questions. And my first question is, can you describe the new funding agreement that you just announced on March the 1st?
Yes, so a while ago we announced that we have the license to a large intellectual property that we still unfortunately cannot say too much about due to NDAs. But we were going to be out searching for potential external funding for a partner to come in and help subsidize the cost of that large development. And so we did exactly that. We went out, and basically what that funding is going to do, it brings the money into the studio periodically on a cadence based on milestones. So once we deliver a certain set of code and whatever other deliverables have been agreed to, we get paid a set from that 25 million crowns that we had secured. And then that leads us up into launch, which also includes a large payment. Thereafter, there is a revenue share with that partner for at an accelerated rate for some recoup, and then settles out into a stated revenue share.
Okay, great. And can you just put some flavor on the attachment numbers on DLCs on your game compared to like how many has bought the original games?
Right. I can't speak about them in specifics, but I can say that they are. If you're familiar with DLC and attach rates in games, they are in line with what's happening at like some of the best attach rates against like live service games at the moment.
Is it possible to?
I would say maybe market wise, I think you'll find anything anywhere between 10 and 15% is pretty good. Okay,
great. And can you please describe what has been the reason for the big success of Ghost of Tabor?
Yeah, look, I think Ghost of Tabor touches upon a lot of what I would call really clear values when it comes to what people want out of virtual reality. So what I find to be really interesting is that people come from the non-VR world, try to come into VR, and you could feel it in the games. They don't feel quite right. It feels like you're playing a normal console or PC game with a thing on your head. It doesn't really feel that good. There's a level of engagement and depth that really speaks to this community. Something that might feel like a tedious chore in a non-VR game is actually something really well accepted. So just state it plainly, like even loading your guns is very manual. You got to take out your backpack, you got to open it up, you got to pull out a clip, you got to lock it in. I mean, that would be an absolute no-no in traditional design. And I think just understanding that value and understanding this community, it adds all that value to it. And and I think there's clearly still some additional genres in the non-VR spectrum to mine to bring in. Combat Waffle's doing some of that with their next two titles, and we hope to be doing that with more in the future.
Okay, great. And another question: you say that you're looking into moving into PC and console games. Mm-hmm. If there's a way to find players who then can go to the VR space, or vice versa.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we always want to have a bridge to XR. We believe in the growth of XR. We think it's going to continue to grow exponentially over time. It's hard to turn your heads away from the multi-billion dollar market that already is the non-VR space and the fandom communities that live there. I mean, our players are also non-VR players, right? And there's a lot of people we can reach with their intellectual property. The way I guess I've always thought about it is being an XR only company kind of makes us a little bit more of like a tech content play. Whereas like we make intellectual property, we make entertainment. It's really important for us to be able to reach as much audience as possible so that we have that long-lasting value out of our intellectual property.
And we have seen launches of new VR gear quite recently. How has this been affecting you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always really exciting. Apple entering the space brings a lot of validity to, I think, what everyone else has been doing. I think it went from suddenly being something that Meta was playing with to now being like a real contending space. I think that validity has energized a lot of other players in the space to come forward, and we've seen new and interesting investments. We've actually seen new categories popping up in the XR space, which is always really interesting. And we've seen the non-adopters of the existing headsets now being excited about VR in general. And so I think that overall is bringing a lot of growth and interest to everything. All of the boats are just rising with the tide. So.
And I guess that your games will be able to be used on all platforms.
We'll see. so some are easier than others. Like as a good example, like Apple's headset, our potential plans for there are going to have to be very focused on hands and mixed reality, augmented reality, whereas that might not be the best place for something that's like a hardcore in virtual world experience. But it really does get us thinking about how we can make sure we can create experiences that could go across multiple platforms, so it's not so difficult for us to find new audience where we need to.
And finally, my last question is, when you look for new projects to take in co-founding for or to invest in, what would you say would be the main thing that you're evaluating?
It's a great question. So what we first do is I think what sometimes a lot of companies do, and to their credit, everyone's going to do it a little bit differently. I took a step outside of the games world for a while to help some of the biggest entertainment companies out of Hollywood decide what television shows and movies they were going to purchase, and that's a daunting task. One thing we learned was like, if you want to think about the size of this table as being the potential, finding a potential hit in the size of this table. What's really important is figure out, can you make that table a little bit smaller before you drop a pin in it? And so we try to take a look at is things like total addressable market. We try to take a look at the product relative to other products in the space that might seem similar to it. We look at social sentiment, we run surveys, we work with influencers. We have a bunch of different proprietary values that we bring into it and try to find a calculable risk assessment to see whether or not we're taking the right decision on the right game. And you can see how that's played out over the year, right? Like, so if you take a look at the first game we launched, the last game we launched, it wasn't a coincidence that the mechanics and the total addressable markets of each one in total changed over time. That was goal. that was the target, and we feel really fortunate that we were able to validate that our model works pretty well.
Okay, great. Ace, thank you for coming here to Carnegie, and thank you everyone for has been listening both digitally and here. Thanks.